All right, thanks, Vass. This is Steve Tuecke here. As Vass said, I'm one of the co-founders of Globus with Ian Foster and sort of the CEO, I guess, as much as anything in the project now. So this is the beginning of a new webinar series we decided to roll out here, where we're thinking about every 6 months, do a what's new with Globus with lots of opportunity for questions and answers. So as Vass said, we really want a bunch of questions. So throughout the presentation or afterwards, put them on the chat. Vass will gather them, curate them, and then we'll have lots of time for Q&A. But to start with, what I'm going to do is spend a little time just kind of catching everybody up on what's new with Globus, and also some of what's coming down the pipe here near term with Globus. Get to the right window. There we go. So just to start things off, just for a couple minutes quick, I just want to remind everybody, especially if we've got some newer people on the line or some people who aren't using some of the more advanced features of Globus, just a couple quick minutes of a reminder about what it is that we do, right? Because a lot of people kind of view Globus as just file transfer, right? And as we'll talk about a lot today with the work we're doing, we go well beyond file transfer and can cover a lot of different use cases at your institutions, and they all sort of in the broad category of research data management, but lots of different use cases within that. Of course, one of our bread and butters that people do a lot is just basic, data transfer, moving data around, accessing their data wherever it is, right? Be it on your campuses, at national facilities, desktop, laptop, scientific instruments, mass storage, and public cloud, right? We kind of can attach to it all. And as you'll see, as we get into the presentation, we're doing a lot of work to broaden even more the set of storage we can connect into Globus so that you have these functions across it. But of course, we have a lot of users using Globus for more sharing, right? Transfer we think of as I need to move data around amongst my accounts and systems I have access to directly with logins. But of course, there's a lot of situations where I want to be sharing data from my campus servers or my own servers or cloud storage with my collaborators at other institutions and not require all the hassles of account management for them to get access. So I want something where I can share my data, and my big data even with my collaborators as easy it is to share, a Word file with Dropbox, right? Just something super simple from a user experience perspective to share that data, not copying all the data to cloud storage like Dropbox on that side, but the simplicity of it is there. And that's what sharing is all about. We've seen a lot of uptake in the last year or two in particular on using Globus to manage data coming from various scientific instruments. A lot of work at the advanced photon source and advanced light sources at Argonne, with a lot of campuses with various of the microscopes and cryo-EMs coming on, and helping manage these data workflows from getting the data out of the instrument off into somewhere where you can do the reconstruction of the data. We're getting into some instrument steering sort of use cases where you get some data out, use that to control the instrument, and then ultimately get the results back out to get them processed and often shared out to the users, who that data is for. We're seeing a lot of uptake of that sort of use of Globus more recently. And then, of course, over the last few years, we've also seen a lot of uptake in people developing their own applications and own services with their own REST APIs and their own workflows and automations using the Globus services. So taking our functionality of all the transfer and sharing and publication and search and all the things we're doing, but integrating into their own applications natively. Right on this screen, there's a couple of our examples. On the left side, we have NCAR's Research Data Archive, which is environmental and climate data. It's a curated archive that they've integrated where, and in fact, all of these do this, where basically you can select your data and say, put the data there, right? So select an endpoint and their portal will take care of it all behind the scenes, all using Globus behind the scenes. Right, so we've done a lot of work with our platform to enable these sorts of integrations, like with NCAR, the Sanger imputation service, where you upload information and it'll run sequence analysis and give you back things, or the atmospheric and radiation monitoring services upper right corner. Right, so a lot of interesting uses of Globus that way. And this has just continued to really push Globus forward and the adoption of it forward. We're just super pleased with how things continue to grow with our community. We just recently went past 425, or about 425 petabytes moved, 70 billion files. A couple other interesting, other numbers we're really proud of in here. You see in this middle, 90 subscribers, right? One of the things we did, of course, a few years ago, Globus, if you don't know, right, we're University of Chicago, right? We're a nonprofit provider of software to our research community, but our mission is to do this sustainably so we can be around long term. And so we rolled out this model around subscription-based for all the premium features of Globus. And we're now up to 90 subscribers with the service. So we're seeing, a good fraction of our costs of maintaining and operating Globus are covered by our subscriptions now. That's wonderful. It's exactly what we wanted to happen, and the model's really working great. You see things like number of users, our availability. We're also very proud of that. We host all this on Amazon, and are north of 90, 3 nines availability throughout the year on this. So things are going really well. Really delighted, and we're really want to thank all of you who are subscribers for supporting us with this. So with that, my brief intro, let's get into the fun stuff. Let's talk about what's new and what's coming down the pipe here. So the first place I will start is with storage connectors. So as a reminder, right, of what a storage connector is with Globus, you have the Globus Connect software, Globus Connect Server, that you run against your storage system or in front of your storage system that connects that storage to the Globus cloud services, right? Ultimately, think of it as a protocol translator, right? It provides some standard interfaces so that data access is sort of standardized as storage, and then it has these connectors behind the scenes that allow that Globus Connect server to connect to actual storage systems. They could be file systems. You see on the left side, various file systems like Lustre and IBM Spectrum Scale, aka GPFS. But we can also do non-POSIX file systems. You see a bunch of examples like the Spectra, Black Pearl, Amazon S3 and Ceph as S3 style object stores, Hadoop, HCSC Active Scale, right? So we have a model where we can build out these connectors, and we have a lot of work underway and coming down the pipe for building out the set of connectors we have, right? Part of our mission is really making sure we can connect to your data everywhere, wherever you want it, wherever you have it. We want to make sure Globus can be an interface or the interface to manage that data. And so coming down the pipe, we've got work going on right now on Google Cloud Storage. We got Box coming down the pipe soon. We've done some testing with Wasabi, which is a S3 compatible public cloud storage with very interesting competitive price points that looks interesting for our community. And of course, Microsoft Azure blob storage. So those are all planned at some point here in the not too distant future. Lots of others that were being asked for, various on-prem storage systems that support the S3 interfaces, things like that. So very active work here. If you have ones that you're particularly interested in, please do let us know. Send us email at support@globus.org and let us know. What determines what storage systems we do really comes down to demand, funding to do the work, a market for people who are interested in having it, right? And that's what prioritizes what we need to get done with these. So don't hesitate to drop us a note if there's ones you'd like here. One of the big areas, of course, we're putting effort into is the S3 compatible storage systems. I put compatible in air quotes here because, that one of the things, if you've ever tried to use all the different S3 APIs, they're not quite compatible. They're pretty close most of the time. But, that's something, but it's a lot easier than starting from scratch. So one of the things we're doing is investing pretty heavily in building out our support with the S3 API, both in terms of the functionality as well as performance, building a regression test suite so that it makes it much easier to test us, and even so our partners who have these various systems that are S3 compatible can even test it themselves. Again, from the perspective of rolling it out as a supported connector for Globus, it's something that we only allow validated connectors. We've had a lot of challenges in the past of people trying to use their own connectors that don't really work very well. So that, again, depends on everything from customer interest to vendor engagement, if it's a vendor product to do it. But again, let us know. Now, the recent development on the connector front is HPSS, which of course is a big mass storage system used a lot with the very large tape systems at national labs, some of the universities. The great news here is, HPS has always been a bit of a challenge because it's a small community and it's a fairly unusual system, but we now have a community agreed upon sustainability model for how users, the various campuses and organizations using it, what sort of connector fee, but also I want to really thank NERSC and Oak Ridge for investing with a contract over the next few years to help us build out some of the functionality here. So if you're an HPSS shop, drop us a note. There are good things happening on this front. Now, another big bit of news, and some of you may have seen a couple weeks ago, Rachna from our team did a webinar on Globus Connect Server version 5.1. I put the link here in the slides, and we'll make the slides available after this presentation if you want to find these links again. But out on the Globus channel on YouTube is the video from her webinar. I'm just going to do the Cliff Notes version of that, real quick run through of what's happened there. If you want more details on this section, I highly encourage you to go watch her webinar out there on YouTube. So for a while now, we've been working on a new version of Globus Connect Server. Right? The current version of it is version 4. That's what all of you are using, based really just kind of a wrapper around the old Globus Toolkit Grid FTP server that's been around for eons. But there's all sorts of directions we're pushing Globus that have made that, that code base, that direction kind of untenable going forward. So about a year ago, we started a major overhaul of the Globus Connect Server software, which we're calling version 5. And that's starting to come out. The big features of version 5 is we've been talking for a while about getting HTTP access to storage, right? So any endpoint, any system out there to which you can get to via Globus today, all these new connectors I'm talking about, all those systems, not only having asynchronous bulk data transfer through the Grid FTP protocols, but also having HTTPS access with full security, full OAuth support, all the same access control mechanisms as you have in sharing today, but all with HTTP access. Right? So you can do gets and puts directly on your file. Right, this is really big because it opens up a huge number of opportunities for the platform and tying it in much more into the web ecosystem for software and tools out there. So if you've got existing clients that know how to get to data via HTTPS, you can just use them with this new server. Second big thing is a shift. It's been over 20 years since we originally did the standards around what was used heavily in the grid community and a lot of the earlier Globus work around the X509 based user security. Over the last few years, if you've watched us, we've rolled out Globus Auth, which is modern web standards, OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect as the basis for everything. And so that's now rolling in natively into Globus Connect. So all end-to-end everything will be based on these new modern web standards in Globus. Scale out deployments without shared file systems. This is what, particularly as we get more and more of the systems that are not file systems behind us, that are object stores like Ceph or S3, having to have a shared file system between the multiple instances of Globus Connect Server that comprise an installation, parallelized or multi-server installation against the storage system, that is becoming increasingly difficult for our customers to manage. So the new model will allow scale-out deployment, multiple Globus Connect servers across multiple DTNs without having to have a shared file system between them. Simplifies the administration. Multiple storage systems simultaneously. Right? Today with Globus Connect Server 4 and Grid FTP, you have to have different installations of the software in different servers if you have different storage systems. So if you have a POSIX file system and a Ceph file system and you want to talk to Amazon S3 or Google Drive, you would need different installations, different servers for each of those. In the new one, you'll be able to now have all of those running from the same Globus Connect server installation, the same endpoints that will be able to talk to all of these simultaneously. So you can have one set of good managed high performance data transfer nodes, put Globus Connect across it in a scale out deployment, put all the storage systems you have behind it, and you're off and running. Single port for data access. This is probably the number one support ticket we have, probably by far, is firewalls. right? Managing the fact that grid FTP today, that has a control channel on port 2811 inbound, has data channels that are ephemeral, so you have a whole port range of those. Now we're adding HTTPS to the mix. We want to collapse this all down so it's a single inbound port for data access. So it makes firewall admin very easy. So that's a big part of where we're going with this. Improved endpoint administration. We have a lot of demands for making it much easier to automate the installation of Globus Connect Server, Docker containers, all these sorts of things, right? So all of this is stuff that's sort of being mixed into the stew of GCS5 that's rolling out here, and a lot more coming in here as well that you'll see. Right, and our model here is we're releasing a series of 5.x releases. The first one was 5.0 in the fall with Google Drive. We recently, with Rachan's webinar a few weeks ago, released 5.1 that adds the HTTP server and guest collections or shared endpoints to this. As we'll be talking about, we're getting very close to our high assurance support to be able to handle HIPAA and other protected information, and that will require GCS 5.2, so that's coming down the pipe. You'll see 5.3. We'll have a whole series of these until eventually we get up to, and thing to note about these releases is these aren't full replacements for GCS4 yet. We're sort of building up the new functionality and the old simultaneously, such that we'll get to a version 5.n release that includes all of the version 4 features plus all this new stuff we're doing. And at that point, we'll provide an easy migration path from GCS4. So the punchline of that is if you're running GCS4 today, hold tight. Wait until we have, until we announce that GCS 5.x is fully featured, ready to go, easy migration. And it's really only if you want some of the new stuff that you need to go to 5.x at this point. And all this will be compatible is another important feature, right? Is we're not going to require 5 and 4 will talk to each other just fine, right? So it's not like we have to roll out the entire universe of 5 with everybody on a single day. We don't have flag day, right? So you'll be able to roll out 5 now, have it work with 4 as you upgrade all that. It'll be a nice smooth transition there. So just a couple words on the 5.1 work, right? The big thing is this server overhaul. And again, I'm just going to fly through this here because Rachna goes into much more details in a recorded presentation a couple of weeks ago. Key thing is, like I said, we've really changed the model quite a bit. So you'll see this coming down the pipe again. It'll have clean migration. It'll all work with GCS4. But ultimately, if you think of these as I've got a couple data transfer nodes, a couple Linux servers running out there, well connected to the network, well connected to the storage systems I want. The first thing I do is install Globus Connect Server across these and turn them into, this is where we're changing around the terminology a bit in the model, is that you connect these all together into an endpoint. Right? Then from that endpoint, what I can do is start configuring connectors against them. So I can add, for example, a POSIX connector, at which point a new sort of abstraction for admins to think about here in the new model is then what I do with that is I create these storage gateways, which are essentially policies, if you will. They're sort of taking a particular directory off my file system, putting particular policies about who can use it, who can create endpoints or what we call collections in the new model against this. You can have multiple connectors and of course, multiple gateways. And then from that, all these, what we knew in the new model called collections. Today, the endpoint terminology is a little confused because it kind of means both the physical, the deployed software down here, as well as the sort of logical, the shared endpoints and all the stuff that users see up here. So we're cleanly separating this terminology. So users going forward will all just use collection. But from their perspective, collections endpoints are kind of the same thing. But from an admin perspective, what you do is you manage your endpoint, which serves a bunch of collections. Right, so that's coming down the pipe here. Some big differences, Globus IDs aren't needed to install GCS5 like they are GCS4, so you can use your own campus identities to manage this. You can have multiple administrators who can manage all the credentials associated with these things. Endpoints are their own identity within the whole Globus Auth system. So they are first-class subjects, first-class identities, which has a lot of important properties going forward and how you use these. I mentioned single port, right? So in 5.1, we've already got the HTTP and the grid fee control channel sharing, single port 443. Eventually, the data channels will be coming into that as well. Each collection, right? Remember, collections are the logical storage systems, if you will, at the top, the logical file collections. Each of them will have its own DNS name. Remember, every one of these is now accessible as an HTTP server. So every one of these logical collections up here at the top of this picture, every one of these will look like a distinct HTTP server with its own HTTP name, its own folder path stuff, its own security configurations against it, all protected again with access control lists and OAuth. All the certificates will be coming from Let's Encrypt, and then as an admin, you have this extra thing of storage gateways to manage. So again, 5.1 features, what actually just shipped in here is HTTPS as well as the grid FTP. We have the POSIX and Google Drive. Right now, it's still only what we're calling guest collections or shared endpoints, right? Endpoints that allow guest access through Globus access control. Single DTN only, we don't have the scale out yet. And authentication only using identities that are part of the Globus Auth login service. So all of these will be relaxed in the subsequent releases. So if you want, you only need to use 5.1 today. If you want to get Google Drive, and if you have Google Drive, if any of you are the customers that are using that today, you are going to need to upgrade from 5.0 to 5.1. That's the one we're going to be supporting for that. And HTTP, if you want that for development purposes, or if you just want to start playing around with it, right? That's there. Otherwise, wait for the eventual release that's fully featured. So again, go out, watch Rachana's YouTube, learn more about that. Next, I'll move on. Related to GCS, but much broader than that, is coming soon is high assurance or protected data support. Right, so this is, we've been having demand for years for customers who want to use Globus particularly for clinical research use, where there's personal health information, PHI, that requires higher standards of security, requires the ability to do a business associates agreement with us, in this case, us being University of Chicago, around that data. So that's all coming soon. But there's also other types of protected data like PII, personal identifying information. This shows up a lot as you get into, especially like EU with new GDPR, as well as controlled but unclassified data. Right? So this is coming down the pipe here very quickly. So the model is that we'll have a new capability of high assurance endpoints that will allow you to do things like specify that particular identity providers, are required, that the user must have authenticated within the right browser session within some period of time, good isolation between the browser sessions and native apps. And of course, all the other things you'd expect of audit logging, multi-factor, all of this sort of integrated well into this same direction. This said, not just PHI, but also PII. The actual standard that we're rolling out in the first version is NIST 800-171 low. If that doesn't mean anything to you, congratulations. If it does, you'll know what we're doing. It will require GCS 5.2 and beyond with that. And the way we're going to roll this out is in 2 additional subscription tiers. We'll have a high assurance tier if you do not need a BAA with us for HIPAA data. That'll be at 1 level. If you want a high assurance plus the BAA, the legal contract around with liabilities and all that with us, that's another tier, right? So if you're interested in that, please do reach out to us. We're going through with various campuses now, the various security reviews and the like, so that as this rolls out, they can get it up and running quickly. It is going to be available this summer, coming soon. All right, so moving on to the next item, the Globus command line interface. The big thing here, I want to announce, which we announced a few months back, is that we are deprecating our old SSH hosted CLI, right? This is where you could SSH to cli.globusonline.org and use the sort of remote shell remotely to do things. That served us well for a long time, but it's really kind of gotten past its useful life at this point. And meanwhile, we've rolled out over the last couple of years a new client-side, pure Python Globus CLI that's now fully functional, super simple updating installation. It's literally just pip install, --upgrade, --user Globus CLI, and you're off and running. Here's the URL for it, just to give you a super quick flavor of what it looks like. And I get to the right window here, right? So I don't have it installed on my laptop here locally, so I just do the pip install. I'm using the -minus user, which is going to install it into my .local, until the .local directory. So I've now got the Globus CLI installed. And I can run it. There it is. So now I can do things like Globus login. It's got browser integration, so it passes me right into the browser window automatically, takes me through all the normal Globus Auth flows. Now I already logged in with University of Chicago, so Globus Auth knows who I am. That's why you're not seeing a login, say, to my University of Chicago. But if I wasn't logged in, it would be normal login like you'd see to the web application. Normal consent screen. It'll redirect back. And I'm now logged in. All right, I can see, logged in as that. So I can do things now like, let's do a Globus endpoint search for, I know I've got an endpoint with the names Tuecke and Midway in it. So let's search for that endpoint. Here it is right here. That's the endpoint ID, the UID for it. So I could do a Globus LS on that. And I've got remote access, right? And there's a whole bunch of commands, so I can do things like Globus endpoint transfer, right? We've got options for that, right? So pretty much anything you can do in the web application, you can do from this command line, right? So that's really all there is to it to get up and running with the command line and use it. So as I said, we'll be deprecating, shutting down on August 1st is our plan to shut down the old hosted SSH CLI. If you're still using that, need any help, don't hesitate to contact the support, and we'll get you moved off and work with you on that. But otherwise, have at it. All right, next thing I want to talk about is publication. So we rolled out several years ago, moving beyond file transfer and file sharing, the new publication product. And what this does is moves us up in the sort of workflows around publishing data sets. For example, if I publish a paper and I need to make the data set available, or if I've got data from a scientific instrument that I want to capture, that I want to get some metadata associated with, that I want to assign, say, a digital object identifier to and get it into a repository, that's what our publication product is all about, is managing that process of issuing persistent identifiers and getting metadata and curating and all these sorts of things. So that's been out there, got some users of it. We've done some work on that, such as integrate our new Globus Search. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Added internationalization support. And with our friends and colleagues at Compute Canada, have worked with them to use this to roll out a Canadian Federated Research Data Repository. So it's just based on our publication V1 and our Globus Search. Very nice system they've got up and running, is now the Canada-wide data repository. And it's a federated repository, so you can search across lots of Canadian repositories as well as use it as a repository itself. If you want to play with that, have at it. The big news, though, here is where we're going with all of this, right? So in our V1, this thing it's just a web application, right? It's not a platform, really. It's not made for you to integrate into your own applications and modify it, mix and match how it gets used. So what we've been doing, again, with our friends at Compute Canada, as well as projects like the Material Data Facility, we've been building out what we're calling the publication V2 platform, basically decomposing, all the capabilities of the V1, generalizing them, making them more flexible, more recomposable and adaptable by our customers. But because the biggest feedback we heard from our V1 was, love it, but can I have it do this one thing that's a little different? Right, and that was really hard for us with the V1 because a very sort of narrow product based on some existing open source software, they just couldn't adapt in that way. And so we've been building out this new set of services, all with REST APIs, to be able to do all the same things, but much better and much more composable, right? Of course, we have Auth, which provides the security fundamentals to it. Transfer, which of course we've had forever for all the core capabilities, but of course, we just talked about HTTP access. That's a big deal here for more of the data publication use cases, so that users can download data from these repositories through the browser and not have to install Globus Connect Personal locally if they don't want to, right? describing data, metadata forms, browser-based forms, things like that, issuing persistent identifiers against that, like in mint digital object identifiers, and then rich search capabilities, and then having an automation system that can tie this all together. And you could add your own steps in here, or change the order of steps, or add things like automated metadata extraction if you wanted to add steps like that. Right. So ultimately, this is what we're rolling out incrementally at this point. The first one we announced last year in the fall in limited production was Search. The big things about Search is, first off, schema agnostic, right? You can use standard schemas like DataCite. You can use your own custom metadata. It can be scientific relevant metadata. Fine-grained access control, right? This is really important in our space, right? That it's not just about public data. It's not just about that stuff that I want to put out there for everybody. It's also for my private data or my project data that may be more controlled, or that there may be embargoed data around, right? So being able to do access control on individual metadata records as well as independently from the data itself. Now I can enable use cases like allowing data to be published metadata, or at least certain parts of it to be open so anybody can find it, request access to the data, and then get to the data itself. If I can have more sensitive metadata in there that's maybe only available to certain people or projects, right? So that's all supported in here. Of course, it has plain text search, so I can do simple kind of stick in plain text, get ranked results, all the things you expect, but also much richer search, so faceted search. If you think Amazon style, do an initial search, have my facets on the left side so I can click in on various stuff. It's also got a rich query language behind it. It's all based under the scenes. We're using Elasticsearch for a lot of stuff, so we're using much of their query language here. So you can do all sorts of very rich queries against the system, and it's scalable, right? That we've tested this into billions of entries, and we're confident it can scale considerably higher, in part because of the infrastructure we're on. Right, so if you're interested in this, it is in production. It's being used by various groups like the Canadian Research Data Repository, but it's still not there for sort of self-help. Anybody come in and do what you want with it. So that's why we call it limited production. So if you're interested, come contact us. We'll talk with you, assuming it all sort of fits well. We'd like to get people using this. One of the things we've done with that is built a sample portal app using Django that shows how, that kind of shows how you can do this. And we're actually using this in a few production portals now. And just to show you what that looks like, all right, this is one of the portals we built with this Django app for a project that we have at Argonne called Ramses, which is about performance, performance around networks, big data transfers, things like this. And in here, you see we've got this portal. I'm not logged in at the moment, so there's certain data in this that's available publicly. If I go ahead and log in, watch the left side of the screen, you'll notice new data shows up when I log in here, right? It didn't prompt me for a password because I'm in the browser session where I've already got cookies set for that. But what it did there was redirected off to Globus Auth, logged me in, brought me back. And now you see there's some more information available to me that I'm privileged to see in this portal because of this. So I can do searches now against this. So let's go ahead and search for data related to GPFS file system related data. Let's select in a facet here and pick the 2 gig data sets, select one of these. And so now I can see on an overview tab here, some of the metadata that was associated with it, who it is, organization. Also in this particular index, and this is all using Globus Search behind the scenes, right? It has basically a data dictionary, so I can see what the metadata is in here. We've got preview functions where it'll go out and use the new HTTPS capability against GCS5. This just did a simple browser did a get on this HTTPS URL directly against the endpoint to pull that data down. And of course, we can do transfer against this, third-party transfer. So I can say, transfer file. Where do I want to put it? I'll go stick it on my MacBook, so I'll download it to my MacBook. We'll stick it in my share folder here. Submit. And I'm off and running, right? So now this data will land on my laptop. You see my spinning there a little bit doing my download, right? So that's our Django portal. Also behind the scenes, one of the new services we have that can be used behind the scenes in services like this is the Globus Identifiers. Again, remember this picture back here, of this workflow, right? So we've been gradually picking off these pieces. I just showed you using the search platform service from this Django web app. We also just announced very recently a new identifier service, which is sort of for issuing and managing persistence identifiers like digital object identifier, DOIs, ARCs, handles, and we also have our own sort of lightweight Globus one. So if you have use cases, even like Bitly style use, you can use us for that stuff as well, right? We have controls where you as a data site owner with your DOI namespace can control that namespace, control who's allowed to issue identities in it, who can manage it, who has access to update it, things like that. Each identifier, of course, has a link to the data itself, a link to a landing page, right? Part of the DOI universe is there's this notion when you go to that DOI, it'll take you to a web landing page, which then I can look at the metadata and download from there. Visibility information, who's allowed to see that identifier, right? So it's not all just public. We also support sort of private identifiers, private landing pages, all that. You can associate checksums with this. So now I can start having integrity of the data that this identifier is associated with. And you'll see from our tools downstream, we'll be starting to add that into tools like transfer and HTTP downloads and the like so that we can validate all that automatically. You can associate some basic metadata with it, and of course some versioning with replaces, replaced by. Right. So again, it's in limited beta. If you're interested, drop us a note, and we're starting to have real users starting to use this. Next thing I'll talk about briefly is Jupyter integration. Of course, Jupyter's taking off in our community, and so two main things we've done so far with this. We got a lot of work coming down the pipe also to extend this even more. But one is to be able to authenticate to a Jupyter hub with Globus Auth. So you can stand up a Jupyter hub, tie in Globus Auth, and it'll, you can now use your Globus, same way you log into Globus, you can log into a Jupyter hub, but that'll also pass tokens down into the notebooks so that you can do things easily from the notebooks. If you've come to any of our tutorials recently, you've seen a lot of our tutorials are now using Jupyter, but here's what we're now using. So I'm here at our Jupyter hub. So this is actually running in Google Jupyter hub with containers behind it, Kubernetes behind it. So I can sign in with my Globus, start up my my notebooks or my server, my Jupyter engine. Here, this takes just a second. I'm up. These Globus Jupyter notebooks, these are from our GitHub repo, just GitHub/Globus/Jupyter Globus Jupyter notebooks. So for example, our Globus World 2016 tutorials are here, and I can just go in and start doing stuff, and tokens pass through into these notebooks. And so if I run it, you'll see here basically what happens is all the tokens and things get pickled up into an environment, which I can then just extract out, and I'm off and running in my notebook, calling things like the Globus SDK, right? So I can call the same things that the Globus CLI is doing under the covers. I can start doing that from Jupyter notebooks trivially. So that's Jupyter Universe. Next thing I'll mention is SSH with Globus Auth, right? So we've had out there for a number of years, based on the old X509 user certs and user proxies, something called GSI SSH. SSH extended to use that GSI or X509 security. That's used by some communities heavily, like Exceed and a few of the other sort of big supercomputing worlds, a few other places that use it. What we realized, since we're deprecating all the old X509 based stuff, we really wanted Globus Auth working with this. And so that's what this is SSH using Globus Auth as the way you can tie in to your campus identities, to do Globus Auth based automation using SSH, things like that. The key thing about it is, unlike GSI SSH, it uses the standard SSH client. It's just a thin Python wrapper around OpenSSH. So I don't have to deploy a new SSH client or server or anything to use this. I can just drop in Globus SSH client. I'm off and running as a client of this. As a server, likewise, you don't have to replace your OpenSSH server. It's just a PAM module that works with that server. So it's much, much easier to deploy out there. Status of this is beta is imminent. Whoops, should be not imminent complete, should say imminent. For early feedback, we'll be going production of this later in the year. Like I said, a few big communities like Exceed are really pushing on this. Again, just to show you what it looks like, pop-up window here. I've already installed it. One of the things we have still to do is make the installation and login as trivial as the Globus CLI. That'll be coming. But I've got it here. Make sure I'm logged out before I go on. Okay. So we've got a demo server out here called ssh.demo.globus.org, right? So the steps are I first log into it. Now, as I said, this is the stuff that'll be just like the Globus CLI. For the moment, I have to copy and paste tokens. And this is always even a fallback with the Globus CLI. So if you're out on a remote server, but it's a normal Globus Auth login, allowing this client to make use of this one specific SSH server, right? So you have very fine-grained control, right? So I'm now logged in, at which point I can do Globus SSH, Tuecke at ssh.demo.globus.org, and I'm logged in. Right, so I'm out. This is just a server running on Amazon. Right, so I have SSH login. And of course, the nice thing about this is you get some of the nice benefits of SSH keys, right? So I can do it again, and it's single sign-on for the life of these tokens. You get all the good token management capabilities you get with Globus. I can rescind it, so I can remove access to specific clients or specific servers, right? So I have very good, tight control over this for Globus SSH. But for users, it's log in with your account, with the appropriate credentials, and you're off and running. And then, of course, I can log out of a particular server. Oops, I have to log. I'm still out on the remote one. Let me get out of that. SSH, log out, sh.demo.globus.org. Right, and that's all there is to it, right? And so we think this actually could be very interesting, particularly like for campus clusters, right? If you've got a campus Shibboleth server with your logins and your campus clusters are tied to those systems, you can now allow your users to use Globus SSH to log in to your campus system using your normal campus in-common server. You can do automation, right? So you can allow your users, if they want to do automated submission and things like that, remote access to your servers. And, very powerful things you can do with this new capability. All right, a couple more things on the show. Groups. We've had groups in the Globus web app forever. It's used in our sharing capabilities, but it's never really been available widely for our users from a REST API perspective as a platform to integrate with your own stuff. There's various groups who are doing it. We've let various groups have access to our sort of private APIs there. But one of the things we're trying to do is get this opened up. So we're looking, want people to give us their use cases now. If you really want access to our group service from a REST API perspective, let us know, and we'd love to hear your use cases. I think this is the last thing then to talk about is a new web app, right? So we've had the current web app out there, what you all probably know and love with globus.org/app, for many years now. Our classic two-panel manager with the activity and things like that. Well, this is getting a little long in the tooth for a variety of reasons, right? One is we're adding more and more file management capabilities, particularly with the new HTTPS capabilities and other things going on, where we really want to get to the point where you can view the Globus web app as the equivalent of the Mac Finder, but for any research storage system, right? I want to be able to use it for full management of my HPC systems and my cloud storage and everything else out there. So we needed to really improve it a lot. But second, we also needed to really update it for modern accessibility, right? So WCAG 2.0 AA accessibility, so that people that are, for example, vision impaired can make use of the web app. Responsiveness, so that it'll work everything from large desktops to iPhones or small phones, and touch support, right? Really getting that right. So that's all now coming together nicely. course, leverage the new HTTPS capability, so I can do inline viewers and downloads and things like that from the browser. And this is available now in beta, so we encourage people to start using it for HIPAA. In fact, this will be the required interface for it. So let me go back, and you see now I'm here at app.globus.org, and we got this new interface, right? So first thing you notice is we have two options. You can be in single browser, single panel mode, so if you're just doing normal file management, or you can put yourself in dual panel mode, kind of like the current web app, right? So other than that, it's pretty familiar what you should see here, right? Some of the new terminology I talked about of collections, but it's very much like the current web app. So I can search for stuff and say, again, let's search for that same Tiki Midway. There it is. Search for it, right? So most of this you should recognize and know and love. But there are a few new things in here, right? So actually, let me go back over here and go out to a demo 5.1 endpoint. So I've got an image out here, a PNG file. I want to be able to do things like inline view it in a browser, right? So this is something we can do where really all we're saying is go out to that, that web page and download it. I want to do things like inline previews, right? So I could just pop it up right here inline in my browser, right? So you can see where we're going with this, where we'll be able to do inline previews of images and PDFs and eventually more and more scientific data as well, right? So as we get interesting viewers, we can incorporate that inline for users, right? Of course, we can do also things like download, right? So browser-based download of files now becomes very easy to do now that we've got the HTTP server there. And just to show you what it looks like under the covers of the GET link, remember that every collection has its own DNS name, right? So this is the name we give it. You as a customer will be able to add your own CNAME, so you can give it your own name as well on top of this. But it's just a URL, right? So if I click on it, it just goes and gets it, right? Normal HTTP with full OAuth in there, right? So that's the core capabilities. But of course, we still have the full two-pane work in there. So if I want to do a transfer to say, let's take this file and download it over to my MacBook. All right, again, I'll put that, there's my share folder, there it is, I'll put it in there. We have all the normal transfer options, right? All the stuff you know and love today is all still there. We're just sort of getting it into a more modern browser. And then, of course, as I said, we have responsive, so I can even take that window. So this might be more, we can hide the menu here. So maybe if I'm on an iPad, I can go down to that. Once we get down to a certain width, it drops into, more vertical view all the way down to an iPhone, right? So I can do transfers all within this, right? All from my iPhone, monitor, manage everything from here, right? So that's what we're up to with the web app. Again, it's available today in beta. Start using it. We'd love to get your feedback on that. So I think that's all I've got. If you join the community, get out there, get into our list, use the stuff, have at it. Always want to thank our sponsors. And with that, let's get on to questions. Hopefully there have been a bunch of them on the chat. And Vas, we'll turn it over to you to take us where you want us to go.
Thanks, Steve. So we've had quite a few questions on the chat. I've actually been answering those. Maybe for those that haven't been keeping track, there was a question about the availability of S3. When I mentioned it is available and has been available for a while, but perhaps you can speak a little bit more to our plans for S3.
Yeah, so right now the S3 connector is only available as part of GCS version 4, the older version. That's very likely, we're still figuring out exactly what order we're going to do all the remaining bits in 5, but we're getting a lot of demand for the S3 connector in 5. So that should be coming fairly soon in the 5 stream as well. So it's there and have at it.
Okay, and then there was a question regarding the various services that you discussed around data publication version 2 and whether we have any plans to develop a web app around those.
Yeah, that's a great question. Eventually, yes. The thing that we've learned, though, is that very few people directly seem to want the existing web app exactly as it is, right? So the trick on this is more about how do we create a web app that has similar degrees of configurability as doing it directly from the platform level. And one of the pieces I guess I didn't really talk about much in that, another piece in that, if I go back to that slide, is this piece we call automate. And you'll see this word automate in here, which is also the stuff to tie it together. So these pieces will be coming back together in a web app incrementally over time. But at the moment, we're not aggressively building towards that, because what we're seeing is the dominant interest in this is being able to take it and sort of customize it and do it for your own needs. So that said, if you have strong need for a web app, please again reach out to us and let us know why. Right? What about the current V1 is not sufficient, or if it is sufficient, what parts of it do you particularly like? What would you like to see changed? Or if the V1's close to what you want, but you'd want to do something different, what would that be, right? And there is a trial out there. If you want to even just play around with the V1 publish, go to trial.publish.globus.org. Anybody can put stuff into some of these like open trial collections, and you won't pollute anything out there in sort of the real data. So feel free to put what you want in here, within limits. So let us know. We'd like to hear more, right? This is still a work in progress and evolving quickly. All right, Beth?
I think those were the only ones we had so far. There were some other questions that were addressed directly in the chat. If there are other questions, please post them in the chat now.
Ravas, if there's any others you want to summarize that you answered on the chat so we captured on the recording as well?
Yes, there was a question whether the Globus SSH that you demoed is part of the standard subscription, and it is,
Yep.
As is data publication, the current version of V1 of data publication. So for those that are existing subscribers, yes, you can use data publication under your current subscription. You just need to contact us to do some setup up front once you put it into production. But as Steve said, you can go and look at the trial version of that on the website and play around with that, and then contact us when you're ready to go live. Okay, it doesn't look like we don't have any other questions. So again, thanks very much, Steve, and thank you everyone for attending. I think we'll wrap it up here. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.